can only imagine. Oh, I can only imagine. Oh, I can only imagine. I can only imagine when all I will do is forever worship you. I can only imagine. I can only...
I'm back. Unfortunately, none of Kevin's family could be here now. They were here. His father, stepmother, and brother were here last weekend, and were able to see him before he passed. And we're here for a few days. But my family have been here all week with me. My brother John, sister Carol, sister Kathy, and her son, my nephew Chris. And I believe Carol. Yeah. And Carol's going to say something.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. One thing I wish is that our mother could be here. She and Kevin were pretty tight. First of all, of course, he married her daughter, which gave her great, great, great happiness. Kevin has always been, for us, he's been our brother-in-law, he's been uncle, he's been uncle to my daughters, and he's always been so fun, so fun. A visit to or from Kim and Kevin at any time over these last many years has always been full of laughter, full of joy. And this word joy, apparently we can't get away from it. Kevin was really joy, I guess, with a capital J. I just hadn't thought of it that way before. He was so sweet. But he really and truly gave of himself all the time. And I know that for me anyway, I'm sort of speaking for all of us, but for me, anytime that I heard anything about Kevin that I might think was sort of negative, like, well, Kevin doesn't have enough money to do something he wanted to do, before you knew it, there was the money. And for me, I would say, whoa, what's this about Kevin? I guess Kevin is irresistible, really, just irresistible. We all fell for him like a ton of bricks. Everyone, all of our extended family, and of course his family is so dear also. I did just want to tell you a couple of very fun memories for us that we have of Kevin. And of course, when I say Kevin, I mean Kevin and Kim. They truly were one. I guess one half can perhaps expand to be one again, but it's just something it's hard to imagine. But Kevin, I'll just mention when he was ill first, because that's kind of hard, but we went to Santa Monica, many of us, when he was there having treatment. We tried to help where we could. But he was between treatments at the particular time we were there, and he had regained enough strength from the chemo and whatever to talk with us and joke. And I walked up to him and said, Kevin, what's this I hear about you being sick? Good grief, I've flown down from Seattle and disrupted my whole life, and look at you. He never gave in to the pain and the frustration, and he had hideous, hideous times in all of these times that he had to be treated. But the minute he had any energy at all, he was out there again. Kim told us that he was the one going up and down the halls of the hospital helping everybody else. Maybe he was taking his intravenous line with him, but, you know, I'm not sick. I'll just go talk to everyone else. And what a picture really that is. When I'm sick, I just lie in bed. I'm not thinking of doing anything for anybody. So I always found that just so remarkable, and just another demonstration, I guess, of what a loving, loving man he was. But one thing that we all loved about Kevin, all of us benefited, for several years at Christmas time, he and Kim would buy some blank calendars, or they might be calendars with beautiful Hawaiian foliage and flowers. And those were always lovely. But we don't leave it there, do we? Oh, no. We each would open up our calendars, and Kevin, I think he did the drawings. Kevin had always customized each and every calendar for the particular family member. So he would have a page for January, February, March. There would be Mom, Kim, Kathy, Carol, John, everybody, and the nephews as they came along, and the nieces. And he would draw hilarious pictures. I'm sure most of you have seen his artwork one time or another. They would be hilarious, but they would be so perfect for each person. He had just something, an expression in an eye, or a way to draw the hair, a smile, something. But there was no doubt who that person was, and these were just little, almost stick figure drawings. I think that that's remarkable. He did that for several years. I think at least 4 or 5. Yeah. And so who needs a new cashmere sweater, and who needs a new box of Legos? It's these wonderful, wonderful pictures. And over the years, as I've cleaned out my own attic and whatnot, I've saved all those because they were such an expression of him, but also his feeling for us. So we all were very glad to have him. Thank you. Good. Awesome.
Let's go. You guys go first.
Wow, it's harder than I thought it was going to be. My name's Amos Hathaway. For those of you that don't know me, my wife Ellen sends her love. She couldn't make the trip. We got 3 kids at home in Oregon. But I was thinking on the way over, if I had an opportunity to share, and what I would say about my friend Kevin. And like you'll probably hear from a few others, Ellen and I, the reason we're in missions and in ministry is because of Kevin and Kim. We're from Santa Cruz, California, and when we met them, I was actually in Teen Challenge at the time, and they were home for a few years after leaving Delhi, and they decided to bring Bob Fitts to Santa Cruz for this concert, and so Teen Challenge went to this Bob Fitts concert, and it was the first time I'd actually heard worship like that. And of course, in the course of the event, that Bob was talking about this thing called Youth in the Mission, and Ellen and I at the time were considering doing missions. We had no idea what that meant. I'd only been saved like 6 months or maybe a year at the most, and so we heard about this YWAM thing and got applications, and so we went to the church that Kevin and Kim and these guys had put on the concert. It's Calvary Chapel, and we walked in the door of Calvary Chapel, and I was still in Teen Challenge about 9 months in, and he's the first person to greet us at the door, and we didn't know what to think. He didn't have an afro at that time, but his wild hair and very exuberant, and I didn't really know that many Christians at the time, and I was a little scared, but they just they welcomed us in and began to talk to us, and we said, well, we're thinking about doing this YWAM thing. We have this application to Kona, and he's like, no, you don't want to go to Kona, you want to go to Honolulu. Sorry, Darrough, it's what he said. And so, graduated from Teen Challenge, and we started going to the church, and for about a year and a half, Kevin and Kim mentored us and took us out to lunch, went street witnessing in downtown Santa Cruz, organized our sending off party that they had, got the church to get behind us and send us out, and we looked at this as like kind of the first fruits of this new season that they entered into, where previously they were church planting and working overseas, but God had this new season of them becoming mentors to a new generation of missionaries and leaders. And we came to YWAM Honolulu in 1994, and it's because of them that we're doing what we're doing. And because of them, there's hundreds of other young people like myself, although I'm not that young anymore. I'm 38 now, But from here to Bangladesh to India and China, who can attribute where they are because of the life of Kevin and the life of Kim. And, his legacy is that. His legacy is in us. And I know, up until the end, he's like, I've got so much more to do than, that's why he was praying God healed him. And, but I was talking with a friend of mine when we were here in October visiting Kevin, and I was telling him about where he was at and, his health. And he said, God gives us vision, but oftentimes it's not our choice how that vision gets accomplished. And I think Kevin's vision goes far beyond his lifetime. If he lived to be 100, he couldn't accomplish everything that he wanted to see accomplished. And I look at it as like, we are here to accomplish the vision that Kevin has and Kim has, and we're stoked that we'll be continuing to partner with that. But his legacy is in us. Those of you in this room, you're here because he touched your life. And it's our job to fulfill the vision that Kevin and Kim have. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Yoon Newman. And I cry. I'm living in China, and the Lord made a way for me to come here to say goodbye to a dear, dear friend and mentor. And, Kevin, I had a chance to staff with Kevin and Kim for a few years in Honolulu some years ago. And, Kevin just had such a zeal and such a zest for life. And it was everywhere and anywhere. One time we were in the middle of nowhere. It was near the base camp of Mount Everest. And it was kind of a layover little village. And it was like 14,000 feet, and we were all feeling weird because of the altitude and the long trip. And I had to go to the bathroom, and there were a couple of squatty potties, and one was on the woman's side, squatty potty, and one was on the male side. And it was separated by a low wall, and there was no ceiling, but I had to go. So I was going to the bathroom, and I hear somebody coming on the other side, on the male side. And so I just thought, okay, I'll be very quiet. And I'm just squatting there, and all of a sudden I hear, "What a view!" And it was Kevin. And I just yelled out, "Oh, Kevin!" And he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the view out there. But he didn't realize there was somebody on the other side of the wall. But, even from the bathroom, he just, he was just absorb everything and just, it was amazing. And I was just talking to one of the New Hope ladies, and I understand that he wanted some hula ladies to go and dance in one of the, it's a major monastery, or it's a major temple square in Lhasa. And it's called Jokang Temple, and we were there one time. It was our first trip there. And he was in this huge square, and people there, the Tibetans, were coming up to him because he was a foreigner, and a very interesting looking foreigner with his winter hat. And anyway, you got to see. And they were just staring at him. They just do that, and they were just, when Tibetans stare, it's without a smile. It's very serious and very, like, their eyes kind of almost bulge, and they just, and a lot of people get intimidated, and some people get irritated, and it's very stressful. But when one person stares, another person comes, and another person comes, and you quickly draw a huge crowd. And I could still see Kevin, with his hat. And he was in the middle of this growing, massive crowd, and I thought, oh, you just feel bad for people who are in those kinds of situations. And one of the things that really I think of Kim and Kevin a lot is in worship. You guys just inspire me to worship God with your heart. And he just started belting out this worship song, and I think it was Shout to the Lord. And he just, I don't know if you guys have ever heard Kevin sing, but he was just belting it out loud. And anyway, and they were still just kind of, it didn't deter him at all. He just sang through the whole song, and, it was wonderful. And we also learned how much he loved Kim through these trips. And on this one trip, we were sitting in a hotel. We were on the floor in a circle, and he started talking about how Kim is like a part of him, and that when he's apart from Kim, it's like getting your guts ripped out. And all of us girls are just weeping in there because of his love for Kim. It was while I was staffing with him that he gave us the go-ahead, and I think it was the first team to go to China out of Honolulu. And he was such a promoter that he came with us on our second trip. And then after I moved there, it was a year after, he brought a team from an SOME himself. And out of that, we went to Xinjiang, and he saw the Uyghurs, and he was dancing with the Uyghurs. And I'm sure many of you heard of that. And out of that, there came some long-termers. And then he would just come back again and again to encourage. And several years later, he came back, and he taught, and he prophesied with the Chinese brothers and sisters that we had gotten to know and then began to work with. And he just kept sending people over and over again. And so we see fruit. And forever, as long as I'm there, there's sisters and brothers that are there from Honolulu that I know are it's a result of Kevin and his enthusiasm. And even when he passed away, we heard in Xining, there was still fruit. I just got this extra Kevin oof, when I went right away to a couple of friends, local friends. And I said, you've got to believe. I said, my friend just passed away, and he's in heaven. And it was in his honor, just to give me that extra little for life and for the gospel to say. And I want to share here right now for anybody that doesn't know the Lord, that any more days that you live without him is another precious day that's gone by without knowing the lover of your soul. And this is what Kevin knew. And may the Lord be a rock to you and carry you in his arms. Thank you.
There's a verse in the Bible that says when one member of the body suffers, all the members suffer with it, and that's why we're all kind of suffering right now, but we're all rejoicing right now. We're kind of conflicted. But Kevin and Kim and my wife and I joined Youth with a Mission back in 1980. We're part of a worldwide family of almost 20,000 full-time workers and thousands of others that are connected with us in some way. And the co-founder of Youth with a Mission International is here with us today. Darlene Cunningham has flown over. Her husband couldn't make it. He was on the mainland. But Darlene brought over with her the assistant provost of our training university worldwide, David Hamilton, and they're going to come up and share with us for a few minutes. Dar?
I was thinking is that song, I Can Only Imagine. That was so deeply moved all of us. But I thought, can't we imagine, like, wow, I'm really here, and I'm waiting to meet you. And we can just imagine the enthusiasm, not only on the Lord's part, but on Kevin's part, because he couldn't do anything without that kind of enthusiasm. We have a wonderful picture here. And on the front it says, Kevin John Darrough. October 14th, 1956, January 10th, 2009. But between 1956, if you look closely, there's a dash. And it's that dash that we're talking about. That the time in between, what he did that. Kevin was such an important part of this tribe called Youth with a Mission. Actually, if you wanted to have a poster child about what you'd love for every YWAMer to be, he'd be it. He had a specific calling, and there never was any negotiation with that calling. And it was hard for him to be patient with people who tried to negotiate it because it didn't make any sense to him. In gifting and the way that God wired him, he was an optimist. But the sanctification of optimism, friends, leads to faith. And so it wasn't empty optimism and just we're up to try to get everybody up. It was based on a solid rock, Christ Jesus. He had a calling that's already been mentioned that was contagious. We've seen the evidence of that contagious calling just in some of the testimonies we've heard. And he had a calling that always included joy. Always included joy. And should that not be true? Should that not be one of the greatest legacies he brings to you and me? A person who was inflicted with such great trust for a level of suffering that most of us in this room have never gone through, and he could do that with joy. And that's one of the things I want to claim. It's a greater impartation of that joy that supersedes the suffering, that sanctified optimism. A calling that always included multiplication. Paul gave instructions to Timothy. And as Paul instructed Timothy in so many areas, how to live his life, how to run the church, how to select people, how to disciple ones, how to handle social situations, how to involve in conflict, Kevin and Kim could always instruct us in all those categories. Amos has just talked about that. But the instruction that I think Kevin understood maybe better than most people that I would have ever known is the instruction that Paul gave to Timothy and said, entrust this teaching to faithful men that they may too pass it on. The last words that were just here spoken from you was that when she heard that Kevin had gone to his reward, I want to tell somebody else about him. That was passed on to faithful people. Psalms 37:37 says, mark the righteous man, and behold the life of a righteous man, for that in that man is peace. And alongside, somehow there was a capacity with this sanctified optimism that created such joy and faith. There was the peace that passes all understanding. And that's what we kind of have to hang on to today. The why question, it just comes to all of us. Why? Why this man that's all the things that I just described to you? Oh, it seems to me if I was planning on multiplication in the kingdom, I wouldn't have said, Kevin, it's finished now. I don't understand the why. But I do know that God knows what he's doing. That's all I can tell you. And I do know that he knows what's best. We belong to a tribe called Youth with a Mission. We're all over the world, on every continent. And there are about 20,000 people like Kevin and Kim that work full time. And if this tribe today could all be together, and so many are aware of where we are today and are praying, we would begin to hear the drums in Africa begin to beat and tell the story of a man called Kevin. In South America, they'd begin to dance and they'd begin to wave the flags. And the islanders, they'd lay out the finest mats that they had. And they would sit down and they would begin to rehearse the stories of their friend, their mentor, Kevin. In India, over curry and rice, we begin to talk about stories of pioneering. Too many people getting into a rickshaw. Shared conditions and crowded conditions. And always the joy of what Jesus was doing. In the Philippines, in India, in the islands, his neck would be covered with flowers as we shared the fragrance of those flowers and thought of the fragrance of his life. In the Philippines, they'd be dancing over those remarkable bamboo poles, and he'd be in there dancing with them. And when the dance was over and the food was finished, they would begin to reflect and say, don't you remember when he taught us from God's word? Don't you remember when he told us how every day to hear God's voice? And they began to rehearse what he had told them. In Nepal, in China, everybody wrapped up as warm as they could be. Moving closer to the fire and sharing cups of tea, they would begin to speak of their brother, of their mentor, of their father. And all around the world, as all of these expressions would be, as they rehearsed the story of Kevin, we would hear things we have already heard in this room today. We would hear things like, man of God. He pointed me to the word. He gave me such understanding. And besides that, he was just so much fun. One of the strongest words we would hear in the midst of that would be man of God, friend of God, a man of the book, a man dedicated to his wife, his friends, and his family. From Revelation 14, verse 13. Then I heard a voice from heaven say, right, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord. And the Spirit responds and said, yes, yes. And it goes on to say, they will rest in their labor, and their deeds will follow them. We honor Kevin. We can't honor Kevin without honoring Kim. We honor the work of your hands. And we want that legacy to continue in our lives. October 14th, 1956, dash. It's that time that we will hear from so many. This is the man who taught me about Jesus. This is the man who understood what it was to have a level of joy and peace in the midst of the hardest things possible. Therefore, because I saw that example, I too can claim it. And so from around the world, in this tribe, Youth with a Mission, we bless you, Kim. We honor Kevin. And truly we know the best has already come. But let us continue our lives, friends, for the best to yet come of what Kevin planted within all of us.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Reginald Chatsworth. I will be your guest interviewer for tonight's program.
You can't
coming from the BBC here in Beijing, China, where I believe it is about 120 degrees in this city of Beijing.
Pastor Elwin, are you under this rock? Are you in the tree? Maybe he's inside taking a nap. Very good, yeah.
I told her, you know, there's like bars right there, but you can totally reach around and grab her by the neck, you know? It's like, look, I could come around here. A lot of good these bars do, lady.
Here in Beijing, China, you just seen Jesus get down, and that's as good as it gets.
One of the promises I hung on to during the storm was that God has called me to help train leaders and church planters in Asia. Well, next month, for 6 weeks, I'm going to go to India to help train leaders and church planters. This is God's fulfillment of His promise to me to help reach totally unreached people thousands of miles away. Do you think my faith has been strengthened? Do you think our God can do the impossible? Well, you bet He can. Thank you. A good old friend of mine came by and visited, and he asked me a very good question. He said, do you feel like God has given you any unfulfilled dreams, things that haven't been fulfilled yet? And I knew right away, yeah, the deal with helping to plant churches and helping to train leaders, especially in Asia. And I knew that hadn't been fulfilled, and I knew that God had spoken that deep in my heart.
And let me be so bold to ask for your ear.
It's been very rewarding and fun, and some of the people that we help train in India are now long-term workers in India, planting churches. They are impacting the people of India. We've sent people like that to China and to Nepal, and it's really fun to see them be successful. My faith was not just a value, but that my faith was a force. And though I didn't feel God, and though sometimes my hope was almost gone, my faith in God was not just a passive thing, but it was a force. I learned that really the only thing important in this life is serving God, is being a part of the kingdom of God.
Hello, everybody. My name's Uriah. Those of you guys who don't know me, I joined Youth with Mission about 6 years ago, almost 6 years now. I'm from a small town near Portland, Oregon, in the Great Northwest. And before I became a Christian, I was into the whole world, the whole drugs and alcohol and all that. And I had known about the church, and I had known about Christianity, and what I had viewed Christianity as, what I thought Christianity was, I saw that, okay, the world's boring, the world's so empty and unsatisfying as it is. And then if I become a Christian, all that happens then is all the things that are a little satisfying and a little fun, I don't get to do those anymore. And everything that all a Christian's life is this reduced life. This reduced life. And I wanted nothing to do with it. But I saw that having what I thought it was a full life, was not satisfying. So I said, what the heck, I'll try out this reduced life. Maybe it's like a diet or something. Maybe it'll make me happy. And I came to YWAM, and that's when I met Kevin Darrough in my DTS. And what Kevin taught me in my DTS and for the next 5 years as he mentored me and discipled me and called out that calling that God had in my life, he taught me something